Okay, now, is everyone able to see this slideshow screens now?
You're so good. Yes.
Okay. We appreciate you rolling with us as we roll through and move through the 2025 policy platform. We will be talking about policy issues across the region and everything at the state and federal level. So this is just an outline of what we'll be discussing here. So we have a lot of elements to cover today. So really quickly, before we get into the discussion of the policy platform, I did want to take a moment to give an overview of BikeWalkKC as an organization. So the mission of BikeWalkKC is to redefine our streets as places for people to build a culture of active living. And we work to achieve this through five primary areas of focus. So advocacy, which is my wheelhouse, we advocate for the better built environment for people who want or need to walk, cycle, roll, and more. That means speaking up for the policies, the plans, and projects that make it easier for those forms of transportation to be used throughout the metro and beyond. Education, BikeWalk KC has one of the largest education programs of its kind in the country, and we work to teach children and adults how to ride and walk safely, maintain their bikes, and more. We also have a community planner on staff who works to provide technical assistance to municipalities and other stakeholders working on planning and projects that will bring those important changes to the built environment. This includes work on traffic calming demonstration projects, as well as citywide planning documents for active transportation. Additionally, BikeWalk KC relies on data collection to tell a story and provide support to our planning and advocacy efforts, best encapsulated within our community dashboard. Where reliable data is missing, we are able to partner with experts and organizations to research these issues to improve understanding of important topics. And finally, we run the local bike share program. We have rolled out electric assist bikes to give riders a boost to more places, and all of our bikes are now dockless, meaning that you don't need to return them to a kiosk or to end a ride, but you do need to park it out of the right of way so it doesn't block the sidewalk. So every year we develop this policy platform, and the policy platform is a list of priorities we've identified to work on at the local, regional, state, and federal levels. We typically identify the priorities on this list based on two key criteria. One, ongoing efforts. So the first criteria speaks to, whoops, did not mean to do that. Nope, 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 no. Why are we going, man, not going great today. Okay. The first criteria speaks to the idea that advocacy is a marathon, not a sprint, and sometimes the priorities we've identified can take several years to accomplish. This is due in large part to the unpredictability of policy work. Systems are slow to change, it takes time to build support, and there's rarely a reliable map to help you navigate all the obstacles that arise. The second is emerging opportunities. So this criteria speaks to the changing nature of is someone, I'm not sure who's trying. Wait, wait, what is this? Is anyone else seeing the marking on the screen?
Yeah, it looks
Yeah,
like we've got,
yeah. You kick them out.
yeah.
Okay,
You're getting botted here.
And
This is awful.
okay.
Sorry,
I'm so
sorry,
sorry,
Michael.
Michael. That was
Yeah, I'm
not
terribly
okay.
terribly sorry about that, folks.
No, you don't need to be sorry,
Yeah.
Michael. I'm sorry that just happened.
same.
Okay. So we're gonna try one more time with this and get back into this. Again, terribly sorry for the technical difficulties we have been dealing with so far. Okay, so can everyone see the screen one more time? Yes?
We
Okay.
can.
Okay, sorry about that. Um, okay, so the policy platform is our best guess at what multimodal transportation issues can move from the paper to the pavement. It is not an exhaustive list, but it helps us, our members, and our partners understand where most of the focus will be. Okay, okay, seriously, like,
It's
oh,
Alexa Coyle,
okay,
and
Alexa, we will be kicking you out.
and she's using the annotate tool. I don't know if that's Oh, I'm sorry, Alexa. It looked like it was your name popped up on the screen is what I saw. But it's the annotate tool is what they're using. So
Okay.
if there's a way to take that off from. Okay, I saw her name too, Lawrence. Sorry to butt in. I manage events at my day job.
Yes. So I'm really, really sorry, folks. I promise we will get back on track here in just a second, but whoever it is,
I don't know
like,
if there's a way on the admin side to turn the annotate tool off for other meeting attendees. That would at least solve
yeah.
part of the problem.
Let me see here. I don't know how to turn off the tool. Liz, do you know how to? Okay.
I just wanna, sorry, I'm gonna take up a little space. I know I'm not a speaker here, but while
Yeah.
Michael is navigating that, I just wanna say Michael is phenomenal. I learned so much from you and the Community Transportation Academy course offered by BikeWalkKC. And I'm currently taking a policy course, and you gave me a phenomenal foundation. So thank you so much. You are great at the work you do, and I'm just trying to shift energy while you navigate that. So
Yeah. Okay. Here, I'm gonna try to move some of these tools here. Okay.
Thanks. Maybe I'll say something too. Thanks, Kateri. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but that was very nice of you to say. My name is Robin Shook. I'm and Michael and Amy and Liz, just let me know when you guys are ready to go. But I'm a professor at Children's Mercy and the current board chair of BikeWalkKC. And I echo your comments. Michael is amazing, and he is truly one of the great leaders we have in Kansas City, and working to make Kansas City a healthy and safe place for everyone that lives here. So kudos to Michael and the rest of the people that he works with.
Okay. So we're going to try this one more time. Again, I am terribly sorry for all of this. We have not had this happen before, but obviously, if there's a troll here, it must mean that they really don't want us to spread the good news about BikeWalkKC. So, so that's basically our ongoing, our policy platform is a combination of ongoing efforts and emerging opportunities. One last thing that I wanted to note is that especially given the changes afoot in Washington, D.C., it is important to note that our policy platform is a living document that can and will be adjusted based on our best assessment of what we know and don't know. I have several friends who are federal employees, and I actually had one of them reach out today to tell me that they're looking for work because they have been laid off. So this is something that hits particularly close to home for me, as I'm sure it does for many of you. So with that, let's get into the policy platform. Okay, so we're going to start with KCMO, and really what the focus here is with planning efforts and safety improvements. So in the 2024 budget, BikeWalkKC successfully pushed for the inclusion of funding to update the city's walkability plan, something which hasn't happened since 2003. Over the course of 2025, BikeWalkKC intends to work with city staff and others to create a forward-looking document to guide efforts to make our streets safer and easier for pedestrians to navigate. This will likely align with the efforts related to the development of a citywide street design guide, which we'll discuss further in a moment. Vision Zero implementation remains one of the big priorities for BikeWalkKC in 2025. So KCMO is currently the only city in the metro with a dedicated line item for Vision Zero implementation, something which you all helped us to push for back in 2023. Since that time, we've seen the increased funding, and the proposed budget in 2025 builds upon that. In the draft budget released earlier this month, the city is proposing an increase in the line item from $4 million to $8 million, which is fantastic. This funding would be critical to supporting safety improvements throughout the city. That includes improvements along Cleaver Boulevard, which make it safer and easier for people to walk, roll, bike, and use public transit. The funding could also be used to pay for smaller interventions like stop signs and speed humps, which have particularly grown in popularity throughout the city. At least 100 speed humps were installed over the course of 2024, and it still isn't enough to meet demand, which is a good problem to have at this point. Something else we're carrying over from 2024 are our community organizing efforts. So last year, we were able to hire Avery Jones as our new community organizer. And as she explains, organizing can be defined as harnessing community power in ways that give impacted people the platform to push for changes themselves. So to that end, much of Avery's focus is on working with residents and neighborhood groups on the east side of KCMO. That's included targeted efforts along corridors like 63rd Street, as well as supporting efforts related to the Community Transportation Academy. So Avery's hit the ground running and is planning to do more work in 2025. So stay tuned for opportunities to learn more about organizing for active transportation as well. One of the newer items in KCMO I wanted to highlight was the development of a street design guide. So when projects are proposed, there are a number of ways and guides that city staff can use to develop the details of that project. While this does allow for flexibility, it also can create confusion because there isn't always a clear process from start to finish. So a street design guide would help to address this process by making that process more clear and concrete. No pun intended. It would also update and modify some of the existing definitions and designations of portions of our street network that have made the process more opaque or confusing in the past. A big reason why this is something BikeWalkKC supports is that it would more clearly define how to incorporate multimodal elements into future street projects. There wouldn't be as much need to push for the inclusion of safe crossings, bike infrastructure, or transit elements because they would already be under consideration with a guide like this. Another emerging policy BikeWalkKC is exploring is a potential speed limit reduction policy. So it is well documented that speed plays a factor in traffic violence in KCMO. According to our city's Vision Zero action plan, fatal or serious injury crashes are 3 times more likely to occur on a roadway with a posted speed limit of 35 miles per hour. However, all speed limits above 25 miles per hour were found to have a positive correlation with fatal and serious injury crashes. So lowering speed limits and coupling them with additional forms of traffic calming can be an effective means of not only preventing speeding, but also a means of preventing crashes, serious injuries, and fatalities. BikeWalkKC has been looking what other communities across the country have been doing, and this includes places like Atlanta, San Francisco, and Boston. There are a few different ways that this could be implemented in Kansas City, so we're just in the start of having those conversations with staff and electeds about what a specific policy could look like. So stay tuned for more information. The last major policy I wanted to highlight from KCMO is the implementation of the road diet policy. So the original measure relating to road diets or the intentional narrowing of streets was ordinance number 240854. Adopted in October of 2024, this measure created a formal road diet implementation plan for the Public Works Department. This policy aligns closely with the city's Vision Zero policy. That ordinance draws heavily from the city's high injury network, with many of the key routes on that list slated to be targeted for improvements under this ordinance. So while the intent of this is to more closely align road diet upgrades with the city's resurfacing schedule, it isn't a done deal. BikeWalkKC needs your help to keep up the pressure to ensure that these proposed road diets actually become real road diets that we see on our roads. So now that we're done with KCMO, we'll switch gears and jump across the state line and look over at what's happening in KCK. So the first big item I wanted to highlight from KCK is the push to reverse funding cuts from health and transit. So budget cuts last year were rough. Because the UG was looking at a budget deficit, spending cuts had to be made. Even with that, the cuts that eventually made it through were especially rough in the areas of health, which lost a number of staff, and transit, which cut routes in the area. The full weight of these hasn't been fully understood, but what has been seen thus far is quite concerning. Much attention has rightfully been given to the UG Public Health Department's inability to contain the tuberculosis outbreak from last year. And even fewer people who rely on transit can use it to access food, education, medical services, or jobs. So BikeWalkKC has already had some initial conversations with the American Heart Association and other partners in the UG. Our hope is to engage with the upcoming budget cycle and push to restore some of the funds that were lost. The second major item I wanted to highlight from KCK is the development of a Vision Zero action plan. So the unified government is largely able to do this work because they received federal funding via what's known as the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. It's also important to note that KDOT, the Kansas Department of Transportation, kicked in a considerable amount of funds as well to cover the cost for matching funds needed to move this grant forward. So the UG needs this plan for a number of reasons. One of the primary reasons is that compared to the rest of the Sunflower State, the unified government experiences some of the highest rates of traffic violence. And this is especially true for the portion of KCK east of I-635. BikeWalkKC will play a key role in the development of this plan as a member of the steering committee. That means that we'll not only be able to help with shaping what the plan looks like, but making sure that there are opportunities for members of the public to weigh in, share their perspectives, and make this a plan that truly caters to the needs of what people are asking for. And I'll note really quickly if I'm keeping an eye, I can't see the chat, so if it's something really pressing, Amy or Liz can come off of mute and let me know. So the other big item in KCK for 2025 is the mayoral election. Late last year, current mayor Tyrone Garner indicated that he would not be running for re-election, so this opened the door to an open primary and election this year. The filing deadline closes in June, and that's when we'll have a clear picture of the field of candidates, and we'll know who the new mayor is in November. So BikeWalkKC and our partners see this as an opportunity to raise awareness. This is not only true for health-related priorities with the American Heart Association, but also for transit-related issues as well. So, taking a further step back, we'll now look at some of the broad regional issues that we're hoping to work on this year. So the first major item I wanted to highlight from our policy platform is transit funding. No major issue like this can be tackled alone. So with that in mind, BikeWalkKC is happy to begin working with the Kansas City Regional Transit Alliance on this effort. This builds upon existing partnerships we have with key organizations in the transit space, such as the KCATA, the Sunrise local chapter of the Sunrise Movement, and local chapters of the National Federation of the Blind. The need for regional funding comes from the fact that the current system is unsustainable. In short, municipalities have had to pay for transit operations and are increasingly unable to do so. So in order to preserve transit and remove the burden from individual places like KC-Mo, North Kansas City, Overland Park, we need a regional funding approach to be developed. This regional approach will likely come in a piecemeal form from the individual counties of the region. Based on our research and understanding of the policy landscape, Johnson County represents the most immediate opportunity to begin making the regional funding mechanism a reality. The second big regional item I wanted to draw attention to was our continued work with the Transportation for All Coalition. So BikeWalkKC finished our work for the first year and developed a report to document our efforts, and we'll share that in the follow-up. It highlights the funding from our survey work with Porchlight Insights, summarizes feedback from listening sessions we organized, and more. Beyond the report, BikeWalkKC hopes to build upon this work from 2024. That will mostly focus on deeper work through partner subgroups and making progress on items from the coalition's policy platform. As far as the policy platform is concerned, the main items we'll be focusing on with the coalition over the course of 2025 will be transit elements and preparing for the World Cup. The next big regional item I wanted to highlight was the Community Transportation Academy, and some of you heard from Kateri earlier, and she's a fantastic example of one of our alumni. Our first cohort in 2024 was a major success. We selected 18 people from 45 applications, and over the course of 10 weeks, we gave our participants a crash course in the region's transportation system. Evaluation surveys after the course show that an overwhelming majority of students now know how to find their local electeds, budget information, and can locate planning documents as a result of the course. So we're working to finalize the syllabus and application portal for 2025, and our hope is to get those application portals open to the public sometime in the middle of March. Classes are expected to start in late August and continue until early November, so stay tuned for more information. Another regional item we're focusing on relates to bike pedestrian advisory committees, or BPACs. So BPACs are formally organized citizen groups in communities. Their purpose generally is to advise local electeds and staff on ways to make their communities better for walking, biking, accessibility, transit, and other multimodal transportation modes. Part of BikeWalkKC's work will involve supporting existing BPAC committees. This includes the Bicycle Advisory Committee in Shawnee, as well as the Bike Walk Leawood group in Leawood. Additionally, BikeWalkKC wants to see the number of BPACs in the region grow. And to that end, we're working with local champions in places like North Kansas City to move those efforts forward. Additionally, I wanted to highlight the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. So this was one of the new programs that was created by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. The program is intended to support local, regional, and tribal efforts to prevent roadway deaths and serious injuries. In the 2024 awards, about $1.8 million was awarded to communities on both sides of the state line, in addition to the Mid-America Regional Council. This is helping to pay for safety plans and some infrastructure improvements. With that said, the new administration has signaled that it may be willing to move in a different direction from the Safe Systems approach, which would likely put this funding in jeopardy. At the moment, however, members of Congress from both sides of the aisle seem less willing to cut the program because of the impact they've seen it had in their districts. The last but not least regional issue I wanted to highlight was the forthcoming World Cup. There will be a number of games played at GEHA Field at Arrowhead between June and July of 2026. In addition to the games themselves, there will be a number of fan sites around town. There will probably be 1 to 2 teams that will have their base camp or their headquarters during the games in Kansas City, meaning that the team will stay in town even though they may play games in other communities. So to cover this, the Kansas City region is expected to coordinate efforts with places as far away as Omaha, St. Louis, and Manhattan, Kansas. The biggest concern that FIFA expressed when considering Kansas City was its limited transportation and infrastructure options. In choosing KC, there is at least an implicit expectation that the region will improve its transportation system before the World Cup. That's not just for driving, but especially important for transit, walking, and biking. 2025 represents the last construction season before the games. While it is very unlikely that all the necessary improvements will get done this year, there is an opportunity to set in motion the development of what are known as legacy projects, which wouldn't be complete until after the games, but would support long-term regional goals for safety, connectivity, and more. So, moving away from the regional piece, I want to zoom into a couple key suburban communities where we're also doing some targeted efforts in 2025. So the first suburban community where I wanted to highlight our work is Independence. The Indigo Bond is the first general obligation bond that the city has ever pursued. Bonds like these are typically the most affordable way local governments can raise money for projects that may not generate a revenue stream directly. In total, the bond would generate $197 million for various capital improvement projects, and that would include $55 million for street reconstruction and overlay, bridges, and sidewalks around schools. That $55 million would pay for sidewalks around 7 schools in the Independence and Fort Osage school districts, including 3 elementary schools where BikeWalkKC has conducted what are known as built environment assessments. Those schools are Blackburn, Castle Park, and Christian Ott Elementary. I will note that BikeWalkKC has endorsed a yes vote on this measure, so if you have any friends who live in Independence, please encourage them to vote on April 8th in support of the bond measure. The other big item at the suburban level that we're keeping an eye on is Safe Streets and Roads for All efforts in Overland Park. Overland Park was one of several metro communities to receive federal funding through the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant back in 2024. There hasn't been much movement on the use of funds in Overland Park at this point. The urgency to use the funds has been increased because of the broader push by the new administration to claw back awarded funds. So BikeWalkKC will be working to see if we can get movement on this over the course of 2025. Next, I wanted to shift gears and look at the statewide level in Missouri. I'll note really quickly that the reason we don't have anything on the Kansas side this year is really because most of their efforts are kind of internal within KDOT, and it doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities. It's just that when we were developing the policy platform, there wasn't anything major on the Kansas side that we felt we really needed to dig into. So with that, looking at Missouri, the first major item at the state level that I wanted to highlight was the update to Missouri's Vulnerable Road User Safety Assessment. So this is a document that every state was required to develop because of the bipartisan infrastructure law. In essence, it gives a snapshot of how a state DOT understands the issue of traffic violence among people who walk, roll, and bike, and what they're doing to try to address it. Missouri's initial Verusa wasn't very good, I'll be frank, and BikeWalkKC took note. We conducted a comparative analysis of the vulnerable road user safety assessments between Kansas and Missouri, and that analysis played a part in pushing MoDOT to update their vulnerable road user safety assessment. So one of the main criticisms that BikeWalkKC made in our analysis was the fact that MoDOT did very little engagement with people outside of MoDOT. As they work to update their Verusa, we will push for them to include more voices from the active transportation spaces in the Show Me State. Nope, there we go. The main item from the state legislature that I wanted to highlight was related to driver's education. So Missouri has some of the highest failure rates for driving exams in the country. According to USA Today, Missouri's rate of failed driver's license test, 51.3%, was second only to Indiana at 51.8%. The high failure rate also aligns with data from the KCMO Vision Zero Action Plan, showing that younger, inexperienced drivers are nearly 2 times more likely to be involved in a fatal crash. Legislation has been introduced by Representative Reedy of District 57, I should say. That legislation would direct the State Board of Education to develop guidance for high schools to teach driver's education before students graduate. While this legislation doesn't address all the shortcomings with the driver's education issues in Missouri, it is an important step in the right direction. The last big item for the Show Me State that I wanted to mention is our push to get the state to develop a statewide active transportation plan. So Missouri is currently one of only 4 states without an active transportation plan. The others are, actually, I will let folks guess what the states are, and then we will check again when we do questions. What that means, in essence, is that while Missouri may have a clear destination it wants to get to with its transportation system of 0 traffic deaths, it lacks a clear roadmap of how to get there with people who walk, roll, bike, or use public transit. That lack of plans and guidance is showing up in our numbers. MoDOT has released preliminary numbers for traffic fatalities from 2024. While the overall number of deaths has decreased by 4%, there was a 16% increase in the number of pedestrian fatalities. That increase likely means MoDOT will need to allocate 15% of the federal funds it receives to address vulnerable road user safety in 2025. Beyond this, MoDOT is currently working to update its long-range transportation plan. BikeWalkKC and our partners with Missourians for Responsible Transportation, shout out to Jackson, who I think is here today, believe this presents one of the best opportunities to push MoDOT to finally develop a statewide active transportation plan, and we will continue to work through that channel to make that idea a reality. So I wanted to shift gears and talk more about our work at the federal and national level now. The big item that BikeWalkKC will be working on at the federal level is around the issue of reauthorization. In short, reauthorization is the process where Congress works to pass the legislation that essentially guides the transportation priorities for the next 5 to 6 years. This includes funding, programs, priorities, and more. This last process resulted in the bipartisan infrastructure law. So because this is such a massive undertaking, the process usually takes 2 years to complete, not one. The main legislation for this likely won't be introduced until 2026. And so that means that the focus in 2025 will largely be on setting the parameters of what should and shouldn't be considered before the official legislation is written and introduced. BikeWalkKC works a lot with the League of American Bicyclists to coordinate our efforts in DC. We will do that again this year. And much of our work will focus on protecting the existing funding, programs, and policies that support walking, accessibility, biking, and transit. One of our big focuses at the national level will also be working in conjunction with the REAMP network. So the REAMP network is a group of around 150 organizations that are all working toward the big goal of decarbonizing the Midwest by the year 2050. They include organizations from Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, and elsewhere. BikeWalkKC joined the coalition because they had identified transportation as one of the main policy areas they wanted to work on. In their most recent strategic planning efforts, BikeWalkKC pushed for not only transportation to be one of their main priorities, but specifically to focus on multimodal transportation over widespread adoption of electric cars. This year, REAMP is funding some of our work related to transit, and we hope to work with some of our partners to understand more about how to effectively message around transit in different settings. So before we go to questions, I wanted to first thank you all for your patience with all of our technical issues earlier today, but I also want to highlight ways that you can all get involved. So first, the easiest way to stay informed about our advocacy efforts is to sign up for our advocacy alerts through our mailing list. Whenever there's a survey, a public meeting, or key legislation to speak up at City Hall, we will let you know. Part of the reason why decision makers don't always consider active transportation a priority is because people don't tell them to make it a priority. So our second point here is meeting your elected officials and staff, telling them you want these improvements and doing it consistently because it's a critical part of good advocacy. And finally, as we often say, advocacy is a team sport. Nothing happens because of me, it happens because of we. The first step in building a top-tier advocacy roster is to inform your friends and neighbors. Talk to them about the issues they see with the built environment when it comes to active transportation, and start thinking together about how you can push for improvements. So on the advocacy piece, I did want to note what Liz had mentioned earlier, which is that we will have 2 advocacy trainings in May, and you can attend one, both, or the other. Advocacy 101, the first training on May 3rd will cover Advocacy 101 and Advocacy 102. So Advocacy 101 is the basics of transportation advocacy, and then Advocacy 102 covers how to prepare for public meetings and how to be a better public speaker. Advocacy 103 discusses how to build a coalition, and Advocacy 104 explores how to work effectively with staff and elected officials. So with that, I want to thank you all. I'm going to come off of sharing here. And yeah, what questions, what comments, what dad jokes do you have?
Hey, Michael, I have a
Yes.
question about
Mhm.
KCMO, and maybe you already mentioned it and I wasn't listening. Are there any budget hearings left this year?
Yes, there are. So the final budget hearing will be on Saturday, March 1st, and I can find that information here for you. It will be on Saturday, March 1st at 9 a.m. And it will be at the Goppert Theater at Avila University, 11901 Warnell Road. I will drop some more information about that here in the chat. If I can get that to work. There we go. Okay.
I think that you had mentioned that you went to the first budget
Yes.
hearing, and I was so impressed because you said that there were about 50 people there.
Mhm.
Half of them spoke up for transit and or Vision Zero, right?
Yes.
That's
So,
incredible.
mhm. There were, yes, there were about 49 people there, and those 49 people represent a fraction of the city, but they are some of the folks who are shaping what the final version of the budget looks like. And then to answer the earlier question of what are the other states that do not have a active transportation plan, because I know people are just giddy to know about that. Let me see here. Those states are Mississippi, Nebraska, and South Dakota. So if you have friends in any of those states, tell them that they need to get it together on their active transportation efforts. Okay, so we see, man, oh, wow, there are a number of questions coming in through here. So we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna try to get through all of those questions as much as we can. And Alexa, you're totally good. So let's see here. Lawrence, yes, feel free to type your question in the chat. I think you already did. Okay, so Ellen, let's see. Is there an update on the Gillum Trolley Trail connector? Do you expect any progress this year? Great question, Ellen. As far as we know, I think that there's been some conversations about potentially improving the connections on Rock Hill, at least south of Cleaver. And there may be some conversations around Oak Street. So if for folks who may not be familiar, when we were talking about closing the gap, there is it's the gap between the Gillum cycle track and the trolley track trail. So a combination of Cleaver, Rock Hill, or Oak would likely help us to close that gap. So Cleaver obviously has already been covered, but I think in terms of what's being discussed for next steps, Ellen, it would likely be continuing to improve what's already been installed on Rock Hill, or making installations on Oak Street. So yeah, hope that answers your question. Excellent. Zach, does the budget accept online comments if we're not able to make in-person meetings? There is technically supposed to be a way to do that, but the city hasn't been doing the most effective job of keeping up on that. If you're not able to make it to the budget meetings, the link that I shared with our priorities does include a link where you can send an email directly to your council members and the mayor, telling them that you want more walking and biking improvements. So if you're not able to make it to the meeting, definitely use that link, and please encourage your friends and neighbors to do the same, because we know from the past that the more we can get people to reach out, even if it's not in person, it's still an effective way of getting the council members to see the importance of investing in active transportation. So great question. Let's see, next question here. Meetings to attend or links to keep up pressure for the road diet policy. There are no meetings currently, but I think the general thing there would just be email your council members and mention that specific ordinance, just telling them to please rapidly implement aspects of ordinance 240854. Great question, Cattery. Okay, Alexa, let's see. Hi, I'm a historic Northeast resident and still not a troll. Most importantly, not an advocate of hate speech. Thank you for that clarification. I'm wondering if you have information about the rest of the work being done on St. John Avenue east of the concourse. Some road diet measures have been done, including putting in bike lanes, but they remain unprotected and are not effectively making the road more narrow or safer for cyclists. Curious if the plans include those lanes being protected in the future. Great question, Alexa. The short version is that we do not know of any efforts to improve or to make those lanes protected at the moment. There was a lot of pushback from the neighborhood associations, especially Indian Mound, about moving forward with protected facilities. And so the compromise was they would install painted lanes for now, and not protected. It doesn't mean that they can't go back and potentially improve them, but it also means that people need to hear from you. They need to hear, the neighborhood needs to hear from you, especially, as well as the city council members for that area. So that's the best that we know for now. But if you want to follow up with me afterwards, I'm happy to talk through that more and answer any additional questions that you have about that specific segment. So thank you for asking about that. Okay. Let's see, Lawrence, what are some of the most important stakeholders currently involved in working with BikeWalkKC? I know I heard some such as REAMP and Children's Mercy. It's really everyone here. So I know it sounds cliche, but it really is a team effort. So like when we talk about our advocacy efforts, it really is a matter of whether people are able to show up and ask for these things from their electeds. I can tell you of various examples where it only took 10 or 20 people showing up at their city council meeting to get the city council to pay attention. There was a recent example over in Fairway where KDOT was proposing to get rid of a bridge underpass for Shawnee Mission Parkway. And several of the neighbors got wind of it and they organized and they showed up at the next council meeting. There were about 26 people who showed up to speak. So slightly bigger than everyone on this call. But because every one of them spoke up very specifically saying, do not get rid of this bridge, find a way to fund it, make it happen, the Fairway City Council said, yes, we're going to do this. They said that that was the biggest showing of everyday residents for something like that. And they said, we have to make this a priority. So I really just want to say that, you know, we work with different partner organizations, but what really helps us with getting these things done is when everyday folks like you are able to speak up, to speak from your own lived experience, and really tell electeds and staff that, yes, this is a priority. Yes, this is something we should be investing in, and I want it done yesterday. So thank you for that question. Let's see, Alex, thank you. How has KCMO done with planning along the Midtown streetcar extension? So I'm going to assume, are you talking about the east-west portion, or are you talking about the portion that they've already built? I'm concerned at the lack of new housing. Can anything be done to help this? I'm going to jump down here and see if there's anything. Okay. So the under construction part now on Main. Okay. So in terms of the housing pieces, that really has been kind of on a development by development sort of thing. And there, as far as I know, that there's not a specific policy that is guiding whether new housing is going to be built there or not. What I would say is that if you haven't already connect with, I believe, Urban Lab, Casey. So I see Chad here. He may be able to tell you a little bit more about that specific streetcar extension portion and if there are opportunities to specifically advocate for the inclusion of new housing. So yeah, so I'm seeing Chad wave. I'll let you, I'll let you come off of mute really quickly if you want to just add anything really quick on that, Chad.
Yeah, not a whole lot substantially. Thanks, Michael, by the way. This is awesome. Not a whole lot substantially. We are, and we've actually been talking about this preliminarily a few months ago with Michael, looking at what parking requirements look like, not only citywide, but especially on the streetcar line. I actually was part of a really informative and helpful meeting this morning along changing some parking requirements in Kansas City, and got to sit with some small scale developers doing really good multifamily projects who got to really clearly communicate how some very small changes in the code would make a lot more projects, even along the streetcar line, possible. So there's some really good things on the horizon. BikeWalk will be involved in those conversations heavily over the next few weeks and months, but it's just kind of really taking off, even though Urban Lab's been kind of doing some work behind the scenes for a few months now. So stay tuned. I'm sure you'll hear from Michael.
Yes. Thank you, Chad. Really appreciate that. Okay, so Alex, I hope that was helpful for you. And feel free to follow up with additional. Great, thank you. Okay, so question from Josh from the Beacon. I'm curious if you have any read on the UG mayoral candidate so far, any commitment stances you're wanting to get from them once the campaign picks up. Right now, as far as what I've seen, there's only one declared candidate in the KCK mayoral race. I believe her name is Crystal Watson, and she's been involved with the Black Chamber of Commerce for a number of years. I know there's been some talk about some other candidates getting into the race, but I don't want to say who until they like formally declare in case they decide not to. I think the main thing from BikeWalkKC's perspective is obviously we're a 501c3. We can't endorse candidates, and we're not going to do that. And I want to be very clear about that. But we can ask questions. So I think that the main questions that we would have is, what are their thoughts about addressing issues related to traffic safety? What are their concerns about improving transit funding? And how specifically do they want to work with members of the accessibility community to ensure that as we're building sidewalks and other facilities, that they're being built in a way that can really make it possible for everyone to be able to get where they need to go. So I know that might be a little bit too general for folks, but that's what I can specifically say here. So I will let that speak for itself. Let's see. I see a couple other comments here. Thank you, Liz, for dropping in the information about closing the gap. Logan, Heartland Conservation Alliance looks forward to continuing to work with BikeWalkKC and other partners on the implementation of the Blue River Greenway vision, a fully connected Blue River Trail from OP Arboretum to the Missouri River with mini trail connections, neighborhood improvements, and native landscape restoration along the way. Thank you, Logan. We're very happy to be working with you. Let's see. Broad question. How are you all being impacted by federal grant budget cuts? Amy, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, we're being cautiously optimistic because right now there is such a stop, start, stop, start. I mean, the strategy is really to stir up a lot of concern and whatnot. From what we know of where our federal funding streams come from, that for right now, they're secured. We haven't had any stop work measures or orders or anything like that, and we're involved with both our own federal funding as well as working in collaboration with partners receiving federal money where we're the subgrantee. So we're absolutely spending extra hours listening and reading as much as possible to stay on top of things. But right now, we are not letting it interrupt our work, not borrow worry and trouble before it's at our doorstep, and it's not yet. So cautiously optimistic, and very determined to make sure that we are able to continue to do the work we do in communities. So that's about as much as I can say. It's a lot of we don't know what we don't know.
I'll also add that we will every year BikeWalkKC goes to DC as part of the National Bike Summit, and as part of that we meet with members of the congressional delegation in both Kansas and Missouri. So one of the things that we're doing this year is we're really reaching out to our partners across both states to provide us letters of support. We know everyone can't go there, but if they can give us letters of support saying, you know, this is the impact that federal funds have had with our planning efforts, with helping us get sidewalks built or trails repaired. We have consistently been told from our partners in DC that the thing that will compel legislators in DC to leave bike ped elements alone is showing legislators how much of an impact it's already having and how much it's going to hurt their constituents to get rid of that. So that's a big part of what we're doing and what we're hoping to convey to the federal delegation when we go in March. And I did want to take a moment, I know we're at the end here, but I did want to take a moment to acknowledge our elected officials who joined, Councilman Greg Reese from Overland Park, as well as Councilman Logan Healy from Overland Park as well. If there are any other elected officials, let me know in the chat, and I'm happy to give you a shout out as well. Another question from Zach. The city has been relatively quiet about the bike ped bridge to be determined alongside the Grand Viaduct to the riverfront. Any info about progress on it? What I can say, Zach, is it sounds like the city is kind of slow walking on this. And it appears from our perspective like it may not be the biggest priority, unfortunately, because the streetcar continues, as I'm sure you've seen, the streetcar construction continues to move forward, and KCMO is not keeping up in lockstep with the development of that bridge, which certainly is concerning, especially given places like the park as well as current stadium that are trying to be more accessible for non-driving users. So we're hoping to get more information about it later this spring, but what we've heard and seen at this point tells us that it's not being treated as the biggest priority, unfortunately. So wish I had better information. With that, if there aren't any additional questions, if folks do have additional questions, I will drop my email here in the chat. Feel free to email me if you have additional specific questions, and I'll kick things over to Liz to close things out.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate all of the support that you give to BikeWalkKC. Sometimes that is $1 or $2. Sometimes that is showing up to these meetings. Sometimes that's showing up to City Hall or talking to your neighbors about how much it means to you to have safe streets and walkable, bikeable neighborhoods, good transit to get us where we need to go. Those are all ways that we're supporting each other and we're working together. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will get out that follow-up email as soon as possible this week, and have a good afternoon.
And Michael, thank you for soldiering on, and thanks to this community for rallying around you, because you are not alone. You have defense mechanisms right here against the trolls. They will not win. They will not win.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, everyone. And apologies to Alexa. I promise I did not think that you were. But yes,
you're the nicest troll we've ever met. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.